young girl, I more or less followed the rules, took a few detours as we all do. But again, growing up in a very traditional Italian-American family, food is love. We sort of look forward to sort of following the path that was laid out to us. Graduated from high school, did a year or two in community college, and then sort of did what I was supposed to do with my life, which was get married. Congressman Ryan likes to talk about, if you do the right thing, get a high school diploma, get married, then have children, you're not going to be poor. I don't argue those are good things to do, but that's exactly what I did, and I ended up poor. I ended up homeless. I ended up hungry. And never in my imagination did I think that I could end up in that situation. I think about it now, like, I'm hungry. I'm hungry most of the time. For those of you who have not experienced hunger when there isn't a food pantry at home, when there's nothing in your refrigerator, it's a very different thing. The notion that I was hungry and couldn't have food was something I had no clue actually happened to people in the world. It blew me away when I found myself in that situation. And it blew me away how clueless I was about the poverty of the community I grew up in. I knew there were poor kids, but I never really thought about it. I never really thought that it meant they might not have enough food, that it meant that they might not have a place to live that night. And clearly my experience in poverty was a long time ago, and one of the things that I think is most sad and really infuriating for me is that in some ways things are even worse now for people who find themselves in poverty than they were when I did it. I was able ultimately to become a welfare mom, go back to college. We don't get to do that anymore. We don't get to take for granted that that safety net is going to be there for us. So I wanted to just tell you a little bit about my story, because I said yesterday that we all have to stand up. And so I want to start the process by standing up here. As I said, I did what I was supposed to do. I got married. I got pregnant. And then I found myself homeless, hungry. I wanted to think about what I wanted to share with you. And I wanted to share with you something I'm thinking like, what stands out of my mind the most from my experiences? And one of the things that stands out is I was very pregnant. And I was homeless. My husband and I homeless. And we were given refuge in an empty apartment. I was hugely pregnant, or at least in my mind I was hugely pregnant. And I was really grateful that we were given refuge in an empty apartment. But if any of you have been pregnant, like sleeping on a floor when you're like 7 or 8 months pregnant is not exactly a restful night's sleep. What I did in that apartment was I found the place that I thought would be most comfortable. I took a bathtub, I lined it with towels, and I tried to sleep in the bathtub that night because it gave me a little bit of support. I found myself hungry and had to go to a food pantry and ask for food. I found myself ultimately poor and on welfare because of the decision I made that Congressman Ryan says is a decision that will save us. I got married, and I married somebody who decided that he was going to beat the crap out of me at every turn. So that answer that we're given, just get married, just do the right thing, is the exact path I took, and the exact path that led me to where I ended up. I wonder, when I listened to Congressman Ryan, if the mistake I made was getting married, was the mistake I made getting divorced? And what I know is while we want to pretend somehow that we are disconnected from the experience of poverty, that we're not at risk of becoming poor, so many of us live paycheck to paycheck. So many of us are one job loss away from being poor. So many of us, women in particular, are one bad marriage or one good divorce, in my opinion, from being poor. So I take personal offense at the misconceptions and at the absolute lies that we're told about who are those of us who experience poverty. And that's why I wanted to stand there with you. I also wanted to stand here today because I didn't know much about community action before I came to work at NYSCAA. And what I've seen is that, the dots in our life connect. Because one of the places I went when I was hungry was I went to what I learned now was a community action program food pantry. I had no idea that was the case back then. I then ultimately ended up, and I'll tell you a little bit, working my way out of poverty as a VISTA volunteer. My life is a tribute to the war on poverty. My life is a tribute to community action. I survived poverty, and today probably pay more in taxes every year than I probably got in my entire welfare benefits because I was able to access the safety net services. As I say, I experienced a lot of troubling and frightening and traumatic things, both when I was in a bad marriage and when I was poor. But having to ask for food stays in my mind as the most painful thing I've ever done. And again, if you know me, you can understand. If you come to my dinner, if we have an extra person coming to dinner, I probably could feed the whole room here because I don't understand portions and I'm so afraid that somebody's not going to have enough food. As I say, I come from a food is love tradition. So the notion that I wouldn't have food and the notion that I would have to beg for food was just something that, again, I could never have imagined. Something that I was thinking about when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about was one experience, again, that stands out in my mind. I went to this wonderful food pantry, and I got a bag of stuff. I don't want it to seem unappreciative, but I didn't really know what the stuff was. It wasn't really stuff I could eat. One of the things that was in there was a can of succotash. Okay, you know what succotash is? Now I make homemade succotash, actually, now that's really good. But I got these cans of succotash in my food pantry bag. I was 8 months pregnant. What I really wanted was Rice Krispies treats. I mean, I appreciated the succotash, but I desperately wanted Rice Krispies treats. So you know what I did? That you could say I cheated. I, misused the food pantry. I took the cans of succotash to a grocery store, and I said, I'm really pregnant. I'm really desperate for Rice Krispies treats. Will you let me exchange the succotash for Rice Krispies and marshmallows? And they did. And that gesture was just an overwhelming gesture of kindness. And that's the kind of thing that somebody might look and accuse me. And I understand I should have eaten the succotash, but I wasn't going to eat the succotash. I wanted Rice Krispies treats. and the compassion that store manager showed to me, because it wasn't even necessarily a store brand, I got it from the food pantry. I think he probably took the money out of his pocket and paid for my Rice Krispies treats. And I will never forget that kind grocery store manager. I'll never forget also, after I was on welfare for about a year, telling my caseworker at DSS that, I just found out about this WIC thing. I'm like a baby. I was poor and pregnant with a baby, and I said, I should have been eligible for WIC. And my case manager said, it's not our job to see that you get the services you're eligible for, and it's not our job. And I said, well, I've had trouble feeding my baby. That's not our job for you to feed your child. I actually thought it was the job. When I first went to the welfare office, I came with a very sort of middle-class perspective on it, thinking like, people are going to help me. They're going to see I just need a couple years of help to get through college. They're going to be nice to me. Again, I would led a very sheltered life. I was stunned at how I was being treated. I was stunned at the lack of empathy and the lack of compassion. I was stunned that they didn't see how brilliant my plan was. Just let me go to college. I promise you I will never take benefits again. They refused to pay for my daycare because I was in a 4-year college, not a 2-year technical institution. I went back there repeatedly and said, I can't afford this. I can't eat. I can't feed my child. And you won't be surprised to know that they repeatedly told me, that's not their problem. That was my problem. That I could have made a decision not to go back to college if I wanted to. And I could have probably continued to live in poverty, or on the edge of poverty. I remember twice, as I say, receiving food pantry services from community action agencies. And I wish I had known then who we were and what that would mean to me in my life. I'm really distant from this experience now, and I live an incredibly privileged life. Some of you got to meet one of my daughters. I have 3 lovely daughters, and I am so lucky. I will never forget the experience of being poor. I will never forget what it felt like to be hungry. I will never forget, and I still have no guarantee that this will not happen again. Over the last few years, I've lost a couple jobs. And in each of those times, I knew that perhaps that would be the moment when I found myself back in poverty. I have never forgotten. I will never forget. I will continue to honor that experience. I will continue to honor you. And I will continue to honor the people who are going to stand up here today and share our experiences. Thank you very much.